Hello, amazing person. Welcome to season 2 of Dear Catalyst Coach podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Cooley. My specialty is helping leaders like you go rogue. Each week, I offer a reading and unpack my blog post, sharing additional stories from my life, including how I went rogue. Rebecca's Gone Rogue is one of my favorite ways of being described by one of my previous employers. I'm very proud of my legacy. Plus, I go deep on all things introversion, leadership, career shifts, stress reduction. I'll be answering questions like, how do I overcome imposter syndrome? How do I reduce public speaking anxiety? How do I reduce my negative self-talk? So tune in each week and let's go rogue together. Get inspired to take action, to go rogue in your life, to start an inner revolution, and to be the catalyst in your own life. Wishing you lots of peace, joy, and freedom. Hello, wonderful person. Welcome to this week's episode, You Do Belong, You Are Qualified, Overcoming Imposter Syndrome. Do you ever feel like an imposter? Do you feel like you're faking it at work? Do you dread being found out and people realizing that you don't really belong there? Do you know what they expect of you, but you don't feel like you measure up? Or do you think they think that you don't know what you're doing? These thoughts and beliefs and emotions can be attributed to the experience of imposter syndrome, a term often used to describe the feeling of insecurity in one's own abilities. For over a decade, I have worked with executives and professionals who experience imposter syndrome, and through our work together have shifted that internal dialogue and perspective to a view that is more in line with who they really are, with a more realistic view of their capabilities and an understanding of what their value is. So here's some guidance for your journey. Shift the internal dialogue by developing a self-perspective that is in line with who you really are and reflects your capabilities rather than your insecurities. You can do this by reflecting on the ways your internal dialogue about yourself and your capabilities limits and restricts you. Reflect on how the experience of imposter syndrome shows up in your life, in your personal and professional life. Ask yourself, do I at times feel like an imposter? Do I feel like I'm faking it? Am I concerned about being found out by the people I work with? When does this experience most occur for me? For example, in meetings when I have to speak and share, when speaking to my customers, or when I'm speaking to my supervisor or my colleagues. Do I often tell myself I don't belong here? Do I feel that others are thinking I don't belong in this position? Do I feel like I don't measure up? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then it's time to discern if your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs are based in reality, meaning your concerns are true, or in fears and insecurities. To determine this distinction, take note of what your body felt when you answered yes to any of these questions. Does your bodily sensation equate to what fear would feel like? For example, racing heart, constriction of any kind, tightening muscles, knots in your stomach, feeling closing around your throat, etc. If so, your experience of imposter syndrome may be based in fear rather than reality. Next, ask yourself, whose voice is it that is telling me that I'm not qualified? Is that voice telling the truth, or is it a voice of insecurity and my own inner critic? Another way to discern between reality and feelings of insecurity is to truly look at your performance, your skills, your capabilities, your qualifications. Ask yourself and ask with complete honesty, beyond fear and insecurity, beyond my feelings of feeling like an imposter, do I know what I'm doing in this job? Would I hire me? Why or why not? Am I doing the job correctly? Am I up to date with knowledge in my field? Am I qualified to do the job that I was hired to do? If the answer to any of these questions is no, truly no, not a no based on fear or insecurity or the imposter syndrome, it's okay. With objectivity and clarity, take note of the areas you need improvement on and make a plan to take action steps towards improving those areas where you are ready to increase your knowledge, qualifications, skills, personal leadership characteristics. Lastly, ask yourself, if I reapplied for this job, what would I tell myself and others about my skills, qualification, knowledge, and why I'm the best candidate for this job? After you've made the discernment, practice shifting the internal dialogue, developing a self-perspective that is in line with who you really are and reflects your capabilities rather than your insecurities. Think through your past work history and the jobs you've had. Write a list of all the skills, qualifications, knowledge that you possess, personal characteristics that make you a great fit for the position. Reflect regularly on what qualifies you for the position. Practice shifting the internal dialogue by noticing how often you tell yourself you don't belong there, you're not qualified, or you're fake or an imposter. Show compassion towards the inner critic. There's a reason it is saying what it's saying, even if it's not true. You may decide to do some inner work with a coach or a partner to discover why the inner critic is saying what it's saying. Then ultimately shift your internal dialogue to what is true. Now that you've discerned between reality and fear and insecurity, you can find words that are more in line with reality. For example, I am qualified for this position, or I am working on specific areas to improve my skill set. Or I acknowledge that I sometimes feel like an imposter, and this is based in fear and insecurity. I offer myself compassion at this time, and accept that this is part of my experience, even though I know this is just a feeling and it's not true. You can also say to yourself, I do belong, I am qualified, I easily and willingly discern between reality and my fear and insecurities. My wish for you today and always is to know that you do belong. My wish is that you see yourself clearly always, and to always offer yourself compassion. Let's unpack this week's episode. So if I told you right now, you do belong, you are qualified, would you believe it? Would you be able to say, "Oh, okay, thank you very much. I do belong. I'm absolutely qualified." And end of issue, end of story. I've got it. Probably not. If you've been working with and suffering from imposter syndrome, it's unlikely that just words will actually make a difference, like I belong, or I'm qualified, or my contributions matter. Words and these kind of thoughts are just not, you've already tried this. This is already the route that you've been trying to go this whole time. It doesn't work because the issue, most likely from this particular thought pattern, is an issue that's relating to stress. And beyond that, it's relating to our deeper beliefs about ourselves. So the mantra, the affirmation, I do belong, I my contributions matter, I am qualified, they're just words. And for most of us, when we're in that stress response, words don't matter. So we can recognize that suffering from imposter syndrome is not just a thought process, it is a full body stress response to something much, much deeper, and that points to something much deeper. So this is the part where we become very brave, courageous students of self, radical students of self, to be willing to go a little deeper and sometimes much deeper to figure out what is at the root of this pervasive thought. So pervasive thoughts come in all shapes and forms. People can call them obsessive, compulsive thinking. Some people may even refer to obsessive thinking or compulsive, repetitive thoughts, like I am an imposter, um, as kind of like mental picking. So if you think of folks that suffer from chronic, I know this is kind of beyond, and this may be like, whoa, I didn't want to hear about this today. But sometimes when we're looking at and thinking about these deeper rooted issues or the deeper rooted causes of our suffering, we got to look a little deeper, and we kind of have to look in those shadow places and open ourselves up to learning about different aspects of our issue so that we can face it. And facing it isn't easy. It requires a lot of courage and a lot of bravery. So if this particular topic brings anxiety, just even learning more about it or thinking about it in a deeper, deeper way, rather than I can just fix this with a mantra or an affirmation, take a few deep breaths, pause the recording, whatever you need to do to step away so that you can get in that place where you're like, I can do this. I can be a brave student of self at this moment. I can look at those shadow places. I can peek into the darker corners of my psyche and my experience so that I can learn and grow and figure out the roots and give solving balm, um, give a balm to those places that need it, that have been hurt from long, long ago. So this is what we're doing. This is what we do. This is that radical shift. This is the revolution. This is the really looking inwards. Yeah, so going back to this idea of, obsessive compulsive thinking, repetitive, pervasive thoughts, the ones that really create distress for us. Thinking that I'm an imposter is very similar to thinking, very similar to the thought of I'm not enough, very much the same flavor. I'm not good enough. There's something wrong with me. I see everyone else contributing and doing well, and they're not fake. They're real. They're doing it. They're seen as capable, but I'm not. And so we're definitely dealing with perspective and thought, but it causes a lot of distress. And as we repeat them to ourselves, these particular thoughts, the distress can mount and continue to mount, and to the point where we can possibly get ourselves into heightened anxiety, chronic anxiety, panic attacks. This may be the reason and the cause for a lot of the fear of public speaking, fear of interviewing, fear of interpersonal communication in team meetings, fear of speaking up, that fear of being judged, that fear of being found out. They're going to see that I'm not real. They're going to see that I don't belong here. They're going to see that I'm not qualified. They're going to judge me. And if they judge me, what happens then? Well, then my security and my job may be threatened. And if my security and my job may be threatened because they don't see that I belong here, because I'm an imposter, because I truly believe that I am, or they may find that out, then if my security and my job is threatened, what then? Okay, well, I may lose my job. And if I lose my job, then I won't have enough money to feed, clothe, and house myself or my family. And if I'm not able to feed, clothe, house myself or my family, I may lose my family, I may lose my friends, I may lose my footing in this in my sense of belonging in this world. And if that, then what is at the bottom of that? What's underneath of that? Well, I may lose my desire to be here altogether. I know that sounds really depressing, but we kind of go into this black hole, and it can just start with this, what seemingly is a very um, straightforward thought. I'm an imposter. The reason that it causes so much distress is something that we need to look deeply at, because it's deeply connected to the base root of the fear of what's at the bottom of that fear, what's at the bottom of that thought. So we can't just leave thoughts, especially pervasive thoughts, to roam wild in our minds. We've got to basically see if we can tame that thought by looking deeply at it, investigating it, dissecting that thought, and really going deeper with it. What is the root? What is the shadow aspect of this particular pervasive thought? There's a reason it causes that much distress, and it's connected deeply to a sense of survival. And I will surely die. I will surely die is the ultimate bottom of most of our fears. Whether the fearful thought is I'm an imposter, I'm going to be found out, or I'm not enough, or I'm really not a good person, whatever that pervasive, distressing thought is, and we all have them. There's not a single person I've met in my entire life, including myself and all the partners I've worked with, from employees to managers to leaders to C-level executives in Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 companies all over the world, that do not have a pervasive thought that they're working with, that they're struggling with, that they have either overcome or are currently working with. And even though you may think I'm the only one that's having this thought and everyone around me has it together, I'm telling you, they don't. We don't have it together. We're all struggling. We're all working through our stuff. And the ones of us that are really, really good at hiding it, that's them. That's their journey. Is the journey to hide it? Is the journey to face it? What is the journey? That doesn't necessarily mean we need to let everybody know or let everybody into what we're struggling with or dealing with. It's nobody's business. Absolutely nobody's business. But somehow, if we are struggling at a deeper level, even if you think the people around you are hiding it, if you look a little closer, and I know this might sound weird, If you look a little closer, if you listen a little deeper, you're going to hear you're going to hear what they may have in common with you. You're going to see that everybody's struggling. Sure, we can have these rose-colored glasses and look at everybody and say everybody else has got it together except for me. But that also is not true. That is um, that's fiction. That's fiction. It's just not real. They don't. And so because of that, people that seemingly have it together, they may have learned skills. They may have learned to compartmentalize. They from those deeper pervasive thoughts. They're maybe experienced more mindfulness, so it doesn't distress them as much when it does come up. Whatever the case may be, if they are dealing with it in a way where you're not noticing it, um, then perhaps in a way that might be it could be it depends on them. If they're dealing with it in a way that you can't see it, their own distressing, pervasive thoughts, there could be a positive or a negative to that. Let's just put it that way. Um, in the positive, they're not impacting you or affecting you with their pervasive negative thought about themselves. And in that way, when they come into a room or they're interacting with you, that pervasive negative thought that they have about themselves, um, example would be I'm an imposter, I don't belong here, I'm not qualified, or I'm not enough, or I'm not a good person. When people go around carrying that particular pervasive thought, including ourselves, people can sense it. Whether or not we say it out loud ever, whether or not we think we're giving it away, there is if it's left undealt with, if we haven't learned mindfulness skills around it, if we haven't learned to face it, to deal with it at some level, that particular thought is coming across. It's either coming across in one's inability to make eye contact because of the shame that they feel when they're having that pervasive, distressing thought. It may come across in one's speaking really low in meetings or when they're having conversations, interpersonal conversations. That particular pervasive thought may come across as one not speaking at all, avoiding interpersonal engagements, conversations, interactions at all. I don't want to be found out. I don't want to be judged. I don't want to be seen. They're going to realize I don't belong here. And I know that's a very distressing thought. So even if right now we're talking about this brings up emotions for you, take a deep breath in, longer exhale. Let your breath be into the belly. So breathing into the belly, letting your belly expand, breathing out from your mouth, longer exhales. So again, distress arises from these pervasive thoughts. So give yourself the kindness to take a mental pause and allow your body to relax. Because telling yourself, this isn't true, I really am qualified, these are just words. And the body doesn't always respond to words. It responds to somatic breath work, tapping, humming, drumming, jumping jacks. All of these things are what the body needs when we're experiencing those stress responses, whatever works for you. So the idea here is when we are experiencing this particular distressing mental thought of I'm an imposter, I don't belong here, we're going into these interactions, and even though we think we're not giving any giving it away, giving any clues that we really feel this way about ourselves, even if we feel like we're faking it really, really well, unless we've dealt with the underlying root, um, most likely we have tells. The tells are in our body language. The tells are in our nonverbals. Again, we may, when we're having those interactions, we may speak really fast. We may speak really slow. We may have a lot of ums. Of course, all of those things have nothing to do with this particular thought. They can come up and arise from other issues or no issues at all. It's just our way of speaking. But you're looking deeply at yourself and realizing, okay, what are my tells? And understanding your tells is not necessarily, I don't want you to use your tells as a way to be like, okay, I just need to fix my tells. That way nobody knows and no one can see me. Don't stop. Don't stop at your behavioral tells. Yes, you can adjust your behavioral tells, but don't stop there. That is not being a radical student of yourself. Go deeper. Go deeper. Solve the wound. Don't just put a band-aid on the surface level scrape. The surface level scrape is how do I change my tells? Addressing the deeper wound is really looking deeply. What has been causing this? What is causing this? So, yeah, going back to that idea of mental picking. So when we engage in mental picking, so I'm not sure if you're aware, but there are people that pick their skin chronically. It's called I'm gonna say it wrong, I'm sure, excoriation, and it's seen as a obsessive compulsive tendency or behavior, um, which I believe is always deeply rooted in trauma. That's just my particular lean on a lot of what we experience, our behaviors, and how we present. A lot of it, especially in interpersonal communication and interpersonal relationship and engagement and interactions, and sometimes the avoidance and withdrawal from it, has a lot to do with how we were hurt, and in what ways we were hurt. And I am yet to meet a person that engages in these particular behaviors, whether it's physical skin picking or mental picking, that hasn't also experienced interpersonal or personal physical trauma, interpersonal trauma, you name it. So when we're talking about facing what we need to face at the deeper roots of our issues, especially this particular issue that we're talking about here, which is equivalent to I'm not enough. I don't want to be seen. I don't want to be found out. Um, that idea of imposter syndrome. Are they going to find me out? I don't belong. I'm not enough. And having that repetitive thought going on in our mind. So basically, um, I would say two parts here. There would be two parts. One would be let's get to the place of certainly what are our tells and how are we behaviorally coming across to others so that we can make people more comfortable in our presence, because that will help heal the interpersonal wound that likely this is stemming from. But again, you know your journey and you know if that's true or not. I wouldn't be able to know unless we talked and met. And even so, I don't diagnose because I'm not a counselor. But so that first part is, yeah, certainly adjust your behaviors, your verbal, nonverbal cues. But again, I think that is the step after, and that's usually the step we stop at, but that's the step after that deeper dive into the first step, which is what is at the root of this mental picking? What is at the root of this obsessive, compulsive, repetitive, pervasive thought that distresses me? What is at the root? Um, Everybody's root is different, um, but typically we're dealing with shame, and shame being I am not good enough, I am not good, guilt being I did something bad. So it could be guilt, it could be shame that we're pointing to here. And so when we're dealing with guilt and shame, and we're looking at our guilt and shame, and we're looking at ways to address the guilt and shame, right? With behaviors, it's relatively straightforward. I adjust the behaviors, I adjust the tells. If I am making people uncomfortable by speaking too fast, too slow, not looking in their eyes, well, I look in their eyes. But that is again just a band-aid, because even while you're looking in their eyes, that abject fear of being found out is going to still be experienced by the other person unless that fear within yourself is addressed. So this is where I encourage you to address those deeper, deeper parts, those deeper, deeper wounds. What exactly happened that created the fear of being found out, that created the fear of not being longing, created the fear of being rejected, created the fear of being of having resources removed from you because you were not perfect, because you didn't do or say everything right. And usually, again, those wounds are from childhood or from teachers or from adults in our lives when we're younger, parents, families, friends. You know, many of us that experience that particular thought, a lot of the folks that I work with, um, they suffer from shyness. They have experienced those interpersonal traumas, and it definitely can result in that feeling of imposter syndrome. So a lot of the folks that I work with are working with that at all levels, a lot of levels of the organization, including leaders, including C-level executives. People are working with this. And so how do we address it? So I think yes, one would be address the behaviors, but until the deeper rooted reason for the thought of I'm an imposter, I don't belong here, I'm not good enough, I'll be found out, they're going to judge me, I will not survive, I will lose my job, I will lose the resources, I'll be rejected, and then ultimately, what is that deep, deep, deep fear at the bottom of the pit? We know what it is. And being able to come back from that and practice our mindful awareness from that. But first, we got to face it. That's just kind of how it goes. There's a lot of resources for facing these deeper rooted issues and shame and trauma, interpersonal trauma as well. And, you can seek out a trauma counselor. Trauma counselors are really helpful. And, my personal journey has included going to a trauma counselor for many, many years of my life to work through a lot of the interpersonal trauma that I've experienced, especially in childhood and adolescence, that had its remnants continue into my adult life with pervasive thoughts and obsessive thinking and mental picking that was extremely distressing, you know. And so I offer this in terms of if it does come up for you, don't start with adjusting the outward behaviors so you're not seen. I would say go into that deep place of self-acceptance, radical self-awareness, look deeply, heal those wounds. When they arise and it's too scary to be with or see, you can simply use that breathing technique. And if you want to put some words to it, just breathing in, I am aware that I am experiencing mental distress. Breathing out, I offer myself love and compassion. If love and compassion feels too big for you, breathing in, I am aware of my mental distress from this thought that I am an imposter. Breathing out, I offer myself just awareness, presence. Breathing out, I remind myself that I'm here and I will not disconnect from myself. I will not abandon myself. I will not turn my back on myself. So ultimately, coming to this idea that even if the entire world found out about who we really are and perhaps found out that we were not 100% qualified, if I can create that sense of inner safety within myself, I accept myself. I give myself grace. I pardon myself. I give myself what I need. I have my own back. I will never leave, abandon, or reject myself. And so that may be that bigger journey of coming to self, coming home to self, being with self, creating that safe inner landscape like we've talked about before within self, creating that beautiful, safe, cozy, warm space within yourself and that connection with yourself, your relationship with yourself. And even if the whole world turned against you, even if the whole world found out you didn't belong in that particular job, which of course at some, is unlikely to be true, as we talked about in the episode, you've got your back. You've got your own back. And that's what ultimately matters, because that's where safety and the feeling of safety and the healing from shame and the healing from overwhelming, distressing fears of being rejected or found out or left without resources or kicked out or not belong, all of that can be countered with, I have me and I will be okay. Because you will be okay. You absolutely will be okay. And ultimately just go into that place of, I am courageous, I am brave, I can look at this deeply. I am not going to stop at just the band-aids. I'm going to go deeper. I'm going to heal this wound. You've got this. I know you do. Talk soon. You've been listening to Dear Catalyst Coach with me, your host, Rebecca Cooley. Thanks for being here. Tune in weekly on Tuesdays for new episodes. Remember to subscribe so you can be the first to know when new episodes are released. A little bit more about me. I've been helping leaders in Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 companies achieve their career and communication goals for over 15 years, helping them to create catalytic and lasting change for themselves, their employees, their organizations, and their families. Overcoming hurdles of limiting mindsets, anxiety, lack of confidence, fear, and more. I was named top 16 coaches in Raleigh. I graduated with honors with an MPA concentrating in strategic leadership. I hold a BA with a concentration in speech communication, graduating magna cum laude. I am a certified master coach and a certified meditation instructor with over 1,500 hours of stress reduction training. So you're ready for a partner to join you during this revolutionary time in your life? You can reach me at www.catalystactioncoaching.com. I offer private executive coaching and corporate training for teams globally. I'm excited to connect with you, wishing you lots of peace, joy, and freedom.